warm, musty darkness enveloped the room. The clock on the nightstand showed 3:12. Michael opened his eyes with difficulty, dimly realizing that he was awakened by a sound. It took him a moment to realize that it was the phone. The ringing was long, insistent, piercing the silence of the night. He stretched sleepily, grabbed the receiver of the landline phone that no one had used for a long time, and pressed it to his ear. "Hello?" There was breathing on the other end of the line. Heavy, uneven, too close. "Who is it?" His voice was hoarse from sleep. There was silence on the other end for a few more seconds. And then a voice, calm, emotionless. "This is your last night." Michael frowned, trying to fight off the sudden chill that ran down his spine. "What?" Breathing again. "Enjoy it." And the line went dead. There was a long hum, then silence. Michael pulled the phone away from his ear and sat up in bed, listening. The house was quiet. Only the faint rustling of the trees outside the window and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Stupid joke. Probably the wrong number. But then why did they call him last night? He looked at the screen of his mobile phone. No missed calls, no messages. The landline wasn't even connected to the city network. No one had used it for a long time. His heart beat a little faster. Maybe he just imagined it? Maybe it was a dream? He ran his hand over his face, trying to get rid of the unpleasant feeling, but it did not go away. Something about this call did not give him peace. But he did not know what exactly. Only in the morning he realized that something had changed that night. He was no longer alone in his house. In the morning, Michael tried to convince himself that it was just a strange dream. Unpleasant, creepy, but nothing more. He brewed strong coffee, turned on the TV, trying to fill the apartment with at least some sound, but the feeling of anxiety did not go away. All day he felt absent-minded, as if something was pulling his thoughts back to that call, to that voice, those words. "This is your last night." Or he tried to forget, the more it sank into his head. But when evening came, he still managed to convince himself that it was an accident. An accident that would not happen again. But he was wrong. When 3:12 came, the phone rang again. A sharp, piercing sound cut through the silence of the night. Michael woke up instantly. Almost holding his breath, he reached out and slowly picked up the receiver. There was a familiar breathing on the line. Long, heavy, as if someone was standing right next to him. "Hello?" His voice broke. Silence. And then the voice. This time it sounded different. Harsh, deep, and filled with pleasure. "You're lying in bed," the voice said. Michael squeezed the phone tighter. "Who are you? Are you scared?" He felt his heart pounding in his temples. He didn't want to look around. But his body moved on its own. His gaze slid slowly around the room. But he felt that they were watching. "Look to the left," the voice whispered. Michael gritted his teeth. He wouldn't look. He would just hang up. "Why aren't you looking?" the voice laughed. Michael opened his fingers, throwing the phone on the bed. Long, monotonous. But the silence in the room was different. If something else was here now. As if something was waiting. The next night the phone rang even earlier. Michael was lying awake when that nasty sound came. His hand reached for the receiver on its own. "You're not sleeping," the voice said. Michael closed his eyes. "Today?" The voice rustled in the receiver, almost touching his ear. "I'm ready to hear." Something creaked in the darkness. He sat up abruptly. It wasn't the phone. Sound came from under the bed. Michael froze. The beeps were still coming from the phone, but he knew he wouldn't hear anything new. Because the voice was no longer on the line. It was here, under the bed. The creaking sound came again, drawn out, slow, like something was crawling out. Michael forced himself to breathe. He didn't want to look. He shouldn't have looked. but his body betrayed him. His head slowly tilted down, his gaze sliding to the floor. Darkness. And then movement. Two hands, pale, with long fingers, slid across the floor, crawling out from under the bed. He wanted to scream, but the sound was stuck in his throat. The fingers scraped along the parquet, reached up to the blanket. And then he saw a face. His face, distorted, dead, the dark holes of his eyes glowing with recognition. Michael grabbed the phone and pressed it to his ear. The beeps were still coming. And then he realized he was calling himself from another place, from another time, from the night when it had already happened. The phone hissed as if the signal was breaking through thousands of voices. And then his own whisper came through the receiver. Run. But it was too late. Fingers grabbed his leg. The darkness opened up, pulling him inside. The next morning, the apartment was empty. The phone was lying on the floor, the receiver off. The screen was flickering. There was only one number in the call list. A call from Michael. The message read, "Missed." But the phone rang again, waiting for someone to pick up.